All right, let's talk about one of the wildest, most chilling secrets to ever come out of the Cold War. Seriously, this is a story about a weapon that feels like it was ripped straight out of a James Bond movie, but it was very, very real.
I mean, just think about that for a second. How would you do it? A death that looks completely natural. Something that leaves absolutely no clues, no weapon, and no reason for anyone to even be suspicious. In the world of spies and secret agents, that's not just a thought experiment. That is the holy grail.
And this was the CIA's actual answer to that question. Now, it might look like some kind of modified pistol, but it's way more sinister than that. Officially, it had a ridiculously clunky name, the non-discernible bioinoculator, but everyone else just called it the heart attack gun. Now, to even begin to understand how a weapon like this came to light, you have to picture the scene in the mid-1970s. America was in a tailspin. The Watergate scandal had just blown the lid off the White House, and nobody trusted the government. There was this feeling, this deep paranoia, that all kinds of dark stuff was happening behind closed doors. And then, the first domino fell. In late '74, the New York Times published an absolute bombshell of a story, exposing that the CIA had been illegally spying on American citizens. The public went nuts. And by January of '75, the Senate basically had no choice but to create a special committee to finally drag these intelligence agencies into the light. And the man they put in charge of this massive undertaking was a senator from Idaho named Frank Church. His group, which everyone started calling the Church Committee, was about to uncover secrets that would honestly shake the country to its core.
And you have to appreciate the showmanship here. At the very first televised hearing, in this moment of pure political drama, Senator Church stands up and holds this weapon for all the cameras to see. Can you just imagine that? A U.S. senator on national television revealing a top-secret assassination gun? The country was stunned.
Of course, everyone watching had the exact same questions running through their minds. What in the world is that thing, and how on earth does it work? Well, let's get into the mechanics, because this is where it gets really chilling.
Okay, the absolute diabolical genius of this thing was its stealth. See, it didn't fire a bullet. It fired a tiny, tiny dart made of a frozen toxin. The shot itself was almost silent. This little dart could go right through your clothes, and the second it entered the warmth of your body, it would melt, releasing this super potent shellfish poison directly into your system. The result? A massive, fatal heart attack. And here's the kicker. The poison was designed to break down so fast that any autopsy would just find a normal heart attack. No foul play, no evidence, nothing.
Just look at these specs. It could hit a target from 100 meters away. The dart was barely thicker than a human hair, and the only mark it left behind was a tiny red dot on the skin. You know, something you'd easily mistake for a mosquito bite. It was a ghost, a weapon engineered from the ground up to be completely untraceable.
And the poison itself, this concentrated shellfish toxin, that's a whole other story. It turned out that even after President Nixon had ordered all of these kinds of biological agents destroyed years earlier, one CIA scientist just didn't. He secretly held onto a pretty big stash of it, supposedly because it was just too unique to get rid of.
So all of this just begs the bigger question, right? We get how it works, but why? Why on earth would you spend time and money creating a weapon that sounds like something a supervillain would cook up? The answer has a name, Project MKNOMI. This was the super-secret CIA program responsible for developing and hoarding all sorts of biological and chemical weapons. Basically, it was their mad science division for building an arsenal for covert ops during the Cold War. And if that MK sounds familiar to you, it should. MK Naomi was basically a sibling to the even more infamous Project MK Ultra, the CIA's horrifying mind control experiments. So this wasn't some rogue project. It was part of a much bigger, much darker institutional push to get an edge on the Soviets, no matter what it took.
And this really shows that the heart attack gun wasn't some isolated, crazy thought. It was part of a whole philosophy of weaponizing deception. The CIA literally hired professional magicians to write manuals on trickery and sleight of hand. And you can see here, they dreamed up all sorts of ways to hide poisons in everyday objects, like a tube of toothpaste.
I mean, the agency's chemical cabinet was like something out of a horror movie. We are talking cobra venom, botulinum, and of course that shellfish toxin, all just sitting on a shelf ready to go for operations anywhere in the world.
And this slide really nails how the theory became practice. On the one hand, you've got these abstract ideas, studying magic and trickery.
And on the other, you have the very real application, designing poisoned pens and exploding cigars specifically meant to take out foreign leaders like Fidel Castro. This was not a game.
So this all leads us to the biggest, most important question of all, the one that still hangs over this whole story. We know they built the gun, we know how it worked, but did they ever actually use it on someone?
When he was testifying under oath, the CIA director at the time, William Colby, gave this incredibly precise, very carefully worded answer. He said, and I'm quoting, "We are aware that that operation was not in fact completed."
But listen to that language again, that operation. It's what you'd call a non-denial denial. He didn't say the weapon was never used. He didn't say the toxin was never used. He just said one specific planned operation never went through. It leaves a whole lot of wiggle room, and the real truth is probably still buried in some classified file somewhere. Now, the revelations from the Church Committee did have a huge lasting impact. As a direct result of all this stuff coming out, President Gerald Ford signed an executive order that flat out banned the U.S. government from ever again engaging in political assassinations. It was meant to be a formal end to this whole dark chapter.
And that just leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought to chew on. This technology, this untraceable sci-fi weapon, was developed more than 50 years ago. So if this is what they had back then, and this is the stuff we actually know about, just try to imagine what secrets or